I was watching Letterkenny the other day.
Your mom was writing letters to Kenny the other day, and every other man in the tri-state area that she's fucked. How about that? What do you think of that, Gabe?
Fuck you, Shorzy.
Fuck you, Gabe. I've tackled more poon than your channel's gotten views. Even your fucking mom hates your channel. You wanna know how I know? Because when I was giving her Arabian goggles last night, she told me. She said my son's a fucking loser and so's his fucking channel.
Alright, come on, Jeff. Pitter-patter.
Pitter-patter, that's the exact sound it made when I beat my L all over your mom's teeth.
So I know that I made a New Year's resolution to go a little bit easier on my channel with like the crass, disgusting, perverse humor, but for anybody out there who's ever seen the show Letterkenny, that was, I feel that was a pretty accurate interpretation of the show. At any rate, so there's this Canadian show called Letterkenny that is now available on Hulu, and there are 6 seasons. This show has been on since probably 2013, and nobody's ever heard of it because it's Canadian, but now people are starting to kind of pick up on it. Now, when I first saw the trailer, my wife and I, we were both sort of like, that's, interesting. The trailer doesn't really give you much. There's like a little limerick, and then you just see like slow motion of like all these people fighting one another, and you can't really get a lot from that. But my wife's friends apparently had seen the show and they recommended it to her. They said that it was really good. And then my friend Tor from work, he also saw the show, or well, started watching it and suggested it to me, and he showed me like the opening scene of the first episode. And I was laughing my ass off. I thought it was hysterical. The dialogue was just like so snappy and quick and just hysterical and merciless. It was amazing. And the funny thing is, to my knowledge, he still hasn't finished watching the show. I blew through it in like 2 weeks' time because the seasons are relatively short. I believe they're less than 10 episodes apiece. It is a very, very funny show, and it is also a very, very strange show. Now, I'm not going to say that it doesn't have its flaws, because it does. For example, there are certain moments, particularly like earlier on in the series, like I want to say the first 2 seasons, where it's almost like the show can't get out of its own way because there are certain side characters that are like so zany. It can almost come across as obnoxious in certain ways. Like there's this particular, what the hell's his name? Stuart? That character. Really weird. And he's sort of like that dude, that goth that you went to school with, or the emo kid, or like, you know, whatever this generation's version of like a goth or an emo kid is, you know, the anti-establishment kind of like hates society, damn the man, hates himself. He reminded me of somebody that I knew back in high school who could never just act normal. And trust me, man, I'm not the type of person who's like, adhere to this strict code and stuff. No, I am totally weird. I am totally batshit. But like, there are certain moments in life where to progress or to thrive or to become successful or even just to coexist amongst your fellow humans, you need to learn how to like sort of communicate with people. And this character, Stuart, really doesn't. Now, the thing is with this show is that any inconsistencies that it has in the beginning, it does eventually sort of, it needs to find itself, like any real great TV show. I mean, in all God's honesty, the first season of Parks and Rec was kind of not very good. And that's not to say that the first season of Letterkenny isn't good. It is really, really, really good. But it needed to kind of find itself. And it's so quick and so fast-paced and so zany in parts, and yet quirky at the same time that, like I said, it's almost like it can't get out of its own way. There is also, in the beginning, again, a lack of, like, really interesting female characters. It's a really, like, dude-driven show, which I mean, hey, you know, I'm a dude. I enjoyed it. There are certain things that are just meant for dudes. But it was kind of nice, like, as the show went along, that they introduced female characters that had a little bit more to do with, like, the actual plot and flow of the story and interacted a little more instead of just being, like, you know, the sexy models. And all the women in the show are portrayed as, like, these kind of supermodels. Which, again, I'm not personally going to complain about that, but considering the fact that this is set in kind of like the backwoods of Canada, and the interesting thing is there's all like the, you know, what they call the D-gens or whatever from out of town, the city folk that they don't like. It's based around this like rural, like kind of farm area. They rag on hockey players a lot, which is really great. So there's the 2 hockey player characters. There's their coach, who's always hollering and swearing and saying about how everything's embarrassing. His wife left him, and it's embarrassing! There's the total shit-talking hockey player, Shorzy, which is what I tried to portray at the beginning of the video, who you never see his face, and he's always just yelling insults at the other hockey players. And I had a feeling that it was the main character, the guy who plays Wayne and also the creator of the show. You know, he made his voice a little bit higher for this character, but he's always just like this merciless, like your mom dialogue that comes out of this guy's mouth. And that's the thing that I love about the show. It really is kind of like a brutal humor sometimes. There are like levels to things, you know, like you can have a humor that's politically incorrect, and on its surface, that's what it is, politically incorrect, but that's only if you take it at face value. There is like a hidden meaning behind it, sort of like South Park. Like I always thought that South Park was kind of the last hurrah for things like that, where they could, you know, point out a real life issue whilst being completely politically incorrect, but you really have to like watch it and kind of like gather for yourself what the underlying meaning is. There's some humor like that. There's a lot of fights. All the characters are completely cartoonish. It's just so quirky and delightfully bizarre, and I really want to know where it's been hiding all these years. I have not been able to stop watching the show. I'm literally done with it. The last episode that they showed was from the season. It was a Valentine's Day episode, and it was hysterical. I mean, the show really found itself, and it's just gotten better and better, but it's been on for 6 years. Where the hell was it? And I'm kind of happy that now it seems to be getting like an American audience, because there's a lot of really good Canadian shows out there. One of my favorite shows of all time is actually Due South. It ran from 1995 until 1998. It's about this Mountie, Benton Fraser, who, for reasons that don't need exploring at this juncture, remained attached as liaison to the Canadian consulate in Chicago in the United States of America. And it's a brilliant clash of cultures, and Canadians are, I mean, I don't want to go on the stereotype that they're all polite, because Letterkenny clearly proves that they are a lot more similar to us than most would suspect. But I know that a lot of Canadians thought that like Americans would be kind of offended by Due South because it portrays Americans as like rough around the edges, kind of like wise ass, like step on everybody's toes, dog eat dog. And here you have this Mountie who's like an old-fashioned dude and very polite and stuff like that. And I sort of feel like that is a lot of the traditional Canadian culture, that they are sort of like old school and kind of like, you know, uniformed and respectful, and, you know, that's how the characters are portrayed. Not that they're always right in Letterkenny. In fact, sometimes they're terribly wrong. But their adventures and their misadventures are all just a beautiful sight to behold. I really hope that they make a season 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. Like, if they can keep going with this, I will watch it until the day I die. This is a hysterical show. And despite the fact that it is kind of like, maybe to some degree kind of testosterone driven, like my wife actually also has found the humor in it quite appealing. So Letterkenny, it's on Hulu, seasons 1 through 6. Highly recommend, guys. Absolutely, you should check it out. You will not be disappointed. And that's all she wrote. I haven't done that in a while.